Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I am your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, with a whole lot to get to here on Tuesday, 48 hours before Thanksgiving. Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story, are they reuniting? Are the Philadelphia Phillies impacting what the Rockies can do this offseason? The Tampa Bay Rays have made a couple trades, but they have not traded players. The Angels are active again. Jake Cave has a home for 2025 and even more on the coaching carousel. But let's get things started with Arenado and Story together again. Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. Sean McAdam of Mass Live reporting that Boston could be considering a position change for Rafael Devers, their all-star third baseman, only just turned 28. Crazy to think about. But I wrote last offseason about Devers being one of several superstar players, several all-stars who could be in line for a position change because of issues defensively. And Devers has never had himself a positive D-WAR. His closest was 0. His closest was being average. But a position change for him to move over to first base or DH would open up the door to third base, to the hot corner at Fenway Park. And we know that the St. Louis Cardinals are listening to offers on Nolan Arenado. Unbelievable to think about, especially when you consider about Rafael Devers possibly moving over to first base. That can be a difficult position change for some players who, frankly, might not have the pop in their bat to stick at a first base. First base is not a defensive first position. It is entirely offensive. But when we're talking about Devers, you're talking about a guy who's won the Silver Slugger Award at third base 2 of the last 4 years. He's been an all-star 3 of the past 4 and has MVP votes in each of the last 4 years. And his power absolutely translates over to first base. More of a low 30 home run kind of guy, but we've seen how position changes can impact a player offensively. And yes, I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani not having to pitch this year and just focus entirely on hitting and not have to deal with the efforts and not have to deal with the general activity that's involved in playing a position defensively. So going from third to first base is a lot easier, is going to be a lot easier for a Rafael Devers. And so does that low 30 home run total that he's typically able to put out there, does that become 40? Very well possible. Red Sox already have Tristan Casas at first base, who missed a lot of this past season, but he did finish third in American League Rookie of the Year award voting in 2023. So Casas could be a perfect trade chip to acquire, you name it. Now, Sean McAdam goes on to say from Mass Live that Devers moving off of third base would fit perfectly with Arenado coming to Boston. It really would. We know St. Louis is listening to offers on Arenado. In fact, earlier this morning on Tuesday, Katie Woo of The Athletic saying that Nolan Arenado is open to playing first base, to giving his next team potentially some roster flexibility. That doesn't really make sense to me because there's not a lot of third basemen that you can say are as good, if not better. If you're as good as Nolan, then sure, you probably want to keep your guy, especially if he's younger, which most third basemen in the game are now at this point. But you keep that guy at third base, and then Nolan changes position. But if he's not as good, even if he's maybe a notch below Arenado, keep in mind, Arenado back to being a Gold Glove Award finalist in 2024. So still an above average defender at third base. So there's not too many places where Arenado would need to move over to a first base. But Arenado, he's open to that kind of flexibility. Now, Arenado still has 3 years remaining on his current deal, $74 million coming to him through the 2027 season. Colorado is paying $10 million over the next 2 years. So St. Louis right now only has to pay $64 million of his $74 million contract that's guaranteed. But Rockies will be sending 2 fat $5 million checks to whoever Nolan Arenado plays for in both 2025 and 2026. And if you're curious where the cash-strapped Colorado Rockies, if you're curious where that $5 million ranks in terms of player payroll on the team, right now Nolan Arenado would be the 5th largest player expense on the Rockies right now in 2025. That's just how it is. That is just how it is. But it's only $5 million, not 20. Such a deal for the Red Sox. Acquiring Nolan Arenado for the St. Louis Cardinals would reunite on the left side of the infield Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story back together for the first time since 2020. That's wild to think about. That in just a few weeks here, once we turn the calendar to 2025, we'll have to say it's been 5 years since Arenado and Story were teammates. And in fact, 2019 was the last time anyone has even seen Arenado and Story play together, according as far as fans go. There were not a ton of games. Of the 30 home games that the Rockies played in 2020, I want to say maybe I went to 6. Probably about 6. I know one game I was at definitively, Charlie Blackmon's walk-off grand slam against the Angels on a Saturday night. I've talked about that a lot. Walk-off grand slam, a weird celebration. Everyone goes back into the dugout pretty quickly because there's no fans to enjoy the moment, no post-game on-field interview. And that's it. The ballpark went back to being dead silent because there were no fans allowed in the ballpark during that 2020 season. And it was a Saturday night. The streets of Lodo were dead silent. That was a wild scene. So first time they could be playing with real people, not cardboard cutouts, in the stands since 2019 for Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story. Mark my word, when Nolan Arenado makes it to the Hall of Fame, when Arenado makes it to the Hall of Fame, it won't be a matter that he goes in with the Boston B on his cap. That's not happening. The 8 years in Colorado were everything for establishing Nolan Arenado. And since the Hall of Fame decides the cap on the player's plaque, Arenado is going with the interlocking CR. The only other option is no logo. And 8 years in Colorado, despite the way it ended, is going to be a decent amount more than St. Louis or Boston. Now, if he stays in St. Louis, I think the total becomes 8-7. But even still, Arenado's best years, most notable years, came in Colorado. Arenado and Story, they got me thinking. A possible reunion made the wheels turn in my head. I had fun looking this up. Have any other notable Rockies ever teamed up on another team? Now, there have been multiple times in which there are multiple Rockies on the same roster. I think Tommy Kahnle and Adam Ottavino. We've seen many different iterations in the past. A lot of times, with pitchers. This past year Robert Stevenson, I know, signed with the Angels, but he got hurt pretty quickly. I don't know if he even played. So him and Carlos Estevez together. Carlos Estevez, Tyler Anderson, sure. But Arenado and Story, should they get together in Boston, got me thinking, have any other notable Rockies ever played together on the same team? Yeah. Atlanta, 1998 through 2000, Andres Galarraga and Walt Weiss both were all-stars with Atlanta in 1998 after leaving Colorado. Forgot about those guys, didn't you? Galarraga did not play in 1999 as he was going through his cancer treatments, so he did miss that season, but was a member of Atlanta at that time. So 2 seasons they played together for 3 years. Walt Weiss and Andres Galarraga together again. Now, we can't really mention, Toronto had both Troy Tulowitzki and LaTroy Hawkins in 2015. They both went over to Toronto. They both went north of the border in the same trade. If you can think of another decent Rockies reunion on another team, I will send you a bunch of Rockies baseball cards. Scouts honor. I'll hook you up. Because I want to know. I looked around. There were a couple close calls with Ellis Burks in San Francisco and Andres Galarraga. No, that didn't really link up. Wasn't anybody notable in St. Louis when Larry Walker was there? No, Matt Holliday was not on the Cardinals at that same time. So there might be another one out there. Maybe a tandem pre-Rockies, before they went to the Rockies. Maybe you have a couple guys that were teammates together. Maybe. I think that would be worth a couple free baseball cards as well. I'll send it your way. Anthony Castrovins of MLB.com on Tuesday crafted an interesting Nolan Arenado to the Philadelphia Phillies trade that I'll talk about here in just a moment. So Arenado is a big chip. The Phillies have one as well. And what the Phillies do this offseason could have a major impact as to whether or not Ryan McMahon ends up getting traded or has a market. I don't think McMahon's going anywhere, but it's worth exploring. It's worth discussing. It's worth mentioning, too, Jake Cave. Jake Cave broke the story on Instagram. I noticed it this morning. He signs a 1-year deal with the Doosan Bears of the KBO, the Korean Baseball Organization. $200,000 signing bonus, $800,000 guaranteed. So he'll make $1 million with the Doosan Bears going over to Korea. So now the man of the people becomes the Seoul man. Seoul, Korea. That's what the Doosan Bears play. Come on now. Angels contending in 2025? They seem to think so. But this is something that they do every offseason. They're active early on, which with fringy players that are in that middle class of free agents and trade acquisitions. So no, I'm not buying it. But they do sign Yusei Kikuchi to be their ace of their staff for the next 3 years. He gets a $63 million deal from the Angels. 33-year-old had a 2.70 ERA after he came over from the Toronto Blue Jays to the Houston Astros. Was incredible for them down the stretch over those 60 innings. Houston was criticized for how much they ended up giving up to acquire Kikuchi. Maybe they were thinking that they could re-sign him. Teams like the Astros, where if you have a long track record of success, you can bring guys in and lock them up to extensions because they see the winning ways of the organization and they want to stick around. But ultimately, Angels going not so far above and beyond, because there were a lot of people projecting about $60 million for Kikuchi. So it wasn't as if they totally would have blown anything out of the water from the Astros, but perhaps the Astros, before they acquired him, to say 3 years, $60 million might have been a reach by, maybe $8 to $10 million before that trade. And then what he was able to do down the stretch for Houston, that jacked up his price in free agency. Angels have been the most active team this offseason. They made the first trade of the year, Jorge Soler, to be their DH. He's got 2 years remaining. They lock up Travis d'Arnaud to a 2-year, $12 million deal. Infielder Kevin Newman signed for 1 year, $2.75 million. And then Kyle Hendricks, maybe there's something left in the tank. They only spent $2.5 million on him. So the Angels, they've got some notable names in their lineup, in their rotation. Still probably need to add a couple relievers this offseason. So they do this every offseason. They get this amalgamation of players that you go, hey, he was good a couple years ago. Hey, maybe this guy can find life. But no matter how much money the Angels spend, they just don't have that it factor. They just don't have an organization that makes players better at the big league level. They've got a farm system that they have depleted because of the quick promotion of those prospects. They draft them and boom, they're up in the majors helping them out immediately. That's great. That's fine. But now where's your trade capital going to come from? So the Angels, not buying it. Definitely not buying the Angels and everything that they've been able to do this offseason. Tampa Bay Rays, they've made a lot of moves. Literally, figuratively, and then back again literally. We know that they're not going to be playing 2025 at Tropicana Field. They might not ever return to Tropicana Field. We know they're going to be playing at George M. Steinbrenner Field. My initial plans were not to be out there for opening day. And now that they're going to be playing at a minor league facility, that's just got me really interested to see what that could possibly look like. To be at that first ever Rays in Tampa game. And no, the Rays don't play in Tampa. They play in the area known as quote unquote Tampa Bay. They play in St. Petersburg, typically at Tropicana Field. But Tropicana Field, damaged during Hurricane Milton, no roof. And because the facility is not capable of being roofless, it's got no drainage system, it's got AstroTurf, they can't play at Tropicana Field in 2025. So they go to Steinbrenner Field, which is also roofless, but it is capable of hosting. It is capable of working around Mother Nature somewhat. And Major League Baseball has helped the Rays out even further. In fact, the entire American League has helped the Tampa Bay Rays with their schedule. A lot of teams. The first one I saw, they actually announced it because, hey, your season ticket holders do need to know this. But the Minnesota Twins, they even had a graphic on social media saying, we just switched our dates. So now we're going to go down to Tampa. I think that we're going to go down early, and then they're going to come play us in July. 19 of the first 22 games of the Rays season is going to be played at home. 19 at home, 3 on the road. The only reason they couldn't work around the 3 road games, otherwise they probably would have played their first 22 plus games at home. They're going to Texas for the Rangers home opener. So they can't switch that one. Can't do that. 18 of their next 32 are going to be at home. So 37 of their first 54 games are going to be in Tampa. Why? To make sure that the Rays are playing in July and in August in Tampa, Florida, as little as possible. The months of July and August are rough, are very, very rough. Now, the team that calls George M. Steinbrenner Field their home during the regular season, the Tampa Tarpons, they had a lot of issues this past season. 6 postponements, 2 cancellations, 4 suspended games between just June 21st through September 8th, the end of their regular season. The Rockies won't have to deal with this, as, again, they're the first ones in and out, and they're done. April and May, it gets the fewest amount of rainfall in that Tampa area, about 3 inches. It goes up to about 7 inches in June and July, and on average in August, 9 inches, 6 in September. So it's one of the reasons why in July and August, the Rays are only going to have 8 home dates. That's it. So they'll basically have 1 homestand of about 5 games and then another 3-game series at one point. By comparison, the fewest amount of home dates for the Rockies in any given month is 12. Right? 2 homestands, 2 3-game series. So that's the fewest that the Rockies have at home. The Rays are only going to be home 16 times in July and August combined because they don't have that dome. Schedule looks a little strange looking at that with all of the white, all of the road games if you go online to look at it. The travel isn't that crazy There's one point where they go from Florida to Kansas City over to Baltimore. Not so bad. Not so bad. There's a Minnesota to Detroit to Boston stretch. That's rough. In August, they start with the Dodgers for 3 at home, and then they're on the road for 2 weeks straight. I think there's only 2 straight weeks of being on the road. So it's pretty much a bookend. They're home a lot in April and May. They're home a decent amount in September. And then in the middle, not a lot. Not a lot for the Rays. So this was weird how they were able to figure it out. But I think MLB did a nice job with the schedule with these American League teams and making those trades when possible. You can't do that with the National League teams because when you play, everybody plays everyone. But when you're playing an interleague game, when you're playing a team from the other league, there's only one series. 1 year you're at home, the next year you're on the road against that interleague opponent. So MLB doing a nice job tweaking the schedule to make it work for the Rays. The Philadelphia Phillies are going to impact what the Colorado Rockies are able to do this offseason with Ryan McMahon. Because the Phillies, look, they're going to continue to spend. Their window is open right now. They're a contending team, and their players are getting a little bit older, but they can squeeze a bit more out of this window of contention, especially considering some of the prospects that they have right now. Dave Dombrowski has actually done a good job of not totally giving away all of his prospect capital. He's done a nice job reserving a few of those guys. But again, this is somewhat of a domino effect that can impact the Colorado Rockies and a potential trade involving a Ryan McMahon. And when you see what the Rockies have already done by cutting loose Brendan Rodgers for what may ultimately be only about $1 million, you know that the Rockies are a little bit strapped right now for cash. And cutting payroll in any shape or form, it's got to be in the books. It's got to be in the books. I had to re-examine the Kyle Farmer signing because I wasn't aware of all the details. I knew that he was going to get $3.25 million guaranteed, $2.5 in 2025, and then a $750,000 buyout. That's going to be guaranteed. There's a mutual option for 2026, but we don't know if he's going to get that full $4 million. $750,000 is guaranteed. So there are incentives similar to the Jacob Stallings deal. As I said last week, there's a Jacob Stallings tax. If you play him 80 or more games, 90, 100 games, you are going to have to pay him a lot more than if he plays less than 80 games. And you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot even more times if you are forced to play a Jacob Stallings more, because now you are not giving those opportunities to your young catchers. Same is going to be true of Kyle Farmer. He's going to get $125,000 a piece for his 200th plate appearance. That's a given. Even if Adael Amador has a real hot start to begin the year, expect 200 plate appearances. That's a lock. He'll get another $125,000 if he hits 350 plate appearances. He's going to get $150,000 if he reaches 400 plate appearances. 450 plate appearances, he'll get another $150,000. And then should he reach 500 plate appearances, he'll get another $200,000 on top of that. And another $500,000 if he reaches 550. Now, there's no reason for that to happen. Both for the Rockies now having to pay an additional $1 million plus, whatever it might end up being, by playing Kyle Farmer that much. But it also shouldn't happen because you've got Adael Amador. You've got Aaron Schunk. You've got Ryan Ritter knocking on the door. You've got Owen Miller as a much cheaper option as your utility infielder right now. Don't forget about him. They picked him up from the Milwaukee Brewers. So there's no reason those things should happen. But should they come to fruition, not only does it mean a lot of mismanagement, but it means Rockies saved themselves about $1 million. And they could end up paying Kyle Farmer the same thing that Brendan Rodgers gets on a 1-year deal with his next team. Again, those are two separate things. It doesn't mean the Rockies saved nothing. It just means they could potentially spend $4.5 million if Kyle Farmer reaches all his incentives. It just means they're going to end up paying $4.5 million, so they still saved $1 million. Rodgers was slated to make about $5.5 million in his final year in arbitration. The Rockies still would have saved $1 million. But it's wild to think that Rodgers' next deal might also be for $4.5 million. So saving money right now is somewhat of a modus operandi for the Rockies. And with Ryan McMahon set to make $16 million in his annual salary from the Rockies, taking that off the books is going to be helpful. He's got more money coming to him in future seasons. $16 million in 2026 and $16 million in 2027. His 2025 contract is only for $12 million. So still significant for the Rockies. But the Phillies could have a lot to say about what happens with Ryan McMahon, because they're going to make Alec Bohm available. They're going to put him out there after an all-star season in 2024. Phillies have interest in Alex Bregman and Willy Adames. They're also apparently in on Juan Soto. They've been in contact with the White Sox for Garrett Crochet. Nick Castellanos has 2 years, $40 million remaining. He's a trade chip. Ranger Suarez, in his final year before free agency, he's a nice trade chip that they could utilize. They've got several prospects as well. And with Schwarber becoming a free agent after this season, as well as JT Realmuto, Philly's got to make sure that they move a couple pieces and parts around so that they're not left shorthanded. So they're going to get a little bit creative, and a deal of Alec Bohm could be pretty helpful. Jeff Passan wrote, coming off his career best season, the 28-year-old Bohm nonetheless finds himself on the trade block. Bohm and Justin Crawford, son of Carl Crawford, would be the start of a package deal that could help the Phillies acquire Garrett Crochet. And if not Crochet, again, Bohm could be the start of any number of trades. Castellanos has got a big name for himself, but he's tanked his value because of his lackluster outfield defense. So you just have him as a DH only. Theoretically, his value increases because it's not taking a hit defensively, but then he's only a DH, and you are now blocking that spot. $40 million over the next 2 years for Castellanos. So the Phillies are going to get creative. They're going to have to swing a couple trades. And Bohm is going to be a big trade chip. We know Nolan Arenado is going to be out there on the trade market. And because of that, those guys will probably have to settle first before someone like the Rockies can trade a McMahon. Doesn't have to be that way. Teams can operate differently. I don't know that there is a major difference between Alec Bohm, Nolan Arenado, and Ryan McMahon. I think they all have their flaws. And you could have a team that just likes McMahon, knows the changes that he needs to make to have more of a full season and rather being a half a season type of player. They might know what it takes to get him out of those big slumps that he seems to find himself in each and every season. We know his defense plays. We know Bohm is not a good defender. You know, he was an all-star and he participated in the home run derby, but he ultimately was only a 3-win player. Didn't get any MVP votes, no down ballot votes. He was their MVP in the first half of the year. His defense did improve this past year, but it's been pretty bad up to this point. So a Ryan McMahon deal becomes a little bit less likely with Bowman and Arenado out there on the block, who, again, you probably would rate a little bit above McMahon right now. And because the Phillies and Cardinals, they like to do business, they aren't going to shy away from trades. They've got more relationships, better relationships with other teams because of their willingness to do business. So that increases the likelihood, not just that Bohm and Arenado could get traded, but that teams are going to be calling the Cardinals and Phillies. And they're going to feel good about investing time in trading with those teams because they know, despite the fact that they are talking the talk, those teams, when they say that they are listening to trade offers, they are more likely than not going to walk the walk. And they're not going to overvalue those players. Anthony Castrovince of MLB.com on Tuesday, he concocted a trade scenario where Arenado would actually go to Philadelphia. St. Louis would acquire 2 prospects from the Phillies, Justin Crawford and Micah Bell. Seattle, a third team in this deal, would give up their number 3 prospect, Lazaro Montes. Phillies get Arenado, as well as closer Ryan Helsley and young right-handed hurler Emerson Hancock, and cash considerations from the Mariners. Rather, the cash considerations are going to have everything to do with Arenado's deal. Emerson Hancock comes from the M's. And then Seattle gets a third baseman in Alec Bohm. That trade looks decent on paper. That seems to be a win-win for everybody, especially if St. Louis is going to truly embrace a rebuild, something we've never seen. I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Cardinals have been good. They haven't needed to rebuild. They've shuffled some things around because they always had really good parts, but they've never really needed to rebuild. Will they do it now? How will Cardinals fans respond to that? Will they understand? Look, St. Louis is heralded for having great baseball fans. They're not going to like being bad, especially in an NL Central where a lot of those teams are not great. Certainly not sexy. But if they know that this rebuild is going to increase their likelihood of being contenders and getting back on track in the future, then trading Nolan Arenado and anybody else not nailed down, we'll see how good of baseball fans they are. We'll see how much they get it. We'll see their baseball IQ. Also drawing interest in free agency, Elias Díaz. Apparently the Baltimore Orioles are interested in the former Rockies catcher. He was an all-star in 2023, the first ever Rockies catcher to make an all-star game, was the MVP in the Midsummer Classic. Struggled this past season, was good for the first couple months of the year, had those calf issues that made it very difficult for him to run, sapped his power. Strong guy. He latched on with the Padres late in the season, made their postseason roster, but didn't see much action. A healthy Elias Díaz is one of the best backup catchers in the game. Adley Rutschman, he's going to get a bulk of the starts. But if you got Elias Díaz as your backup with Samuel Basallo, a nice catching prospect that the Orioles have, I think that would be a great fit for the Orioles. Elias Díaz to Baltimore could happen. Could happen. Picking up from Monday's show regarding Brendan Rodgers and Cal Quantrill, there's a lot to talk about in regards to B-Rod and Quantrill. Tuesday night, talking with Locked On Rockies, my buddy Paul Holden. Make sure you're checking that out. talking even more about Rodgers and Quantrill. But non-tendering Cal Quantrill, that decision now means that there's another former Rockies prospect lurking in the Cleveland Guardians system. Another prospect. Jonathan, how you doing today, buddy? Appreciate you jumping in the chat. The first prospect, of course, Juan Brito, came over in the Nolan Jones trade. He is now the number 8 prospect currently on MLB Pipeline's top 30 for the Guardians. Juan Brito needed to be added to the 40-man roster. Rockies did well to get something for nothing. Now, Brito would have stayed in the system, but he would have been exposed to the Rule 5 draft, and for whatever reason, Rockies said, you know what? We're going to make this guy disposable. They did it with Adrian Pinto in the Randall Grichuk deal. He's still in the minors. He's still lurking in a lot of ways. But Juan Brito wasn't a part of their plans at second base. They banked heavily on Adael Amador. But 808 OPS in AAA last year for the Columbus Clippers, the AAA affiliate of the Cleveland Guardians. 21 homers, 88 RBI, playing mostly second base. With power like that and with a not so great glove, Brito's going to be able to find a home somewhere else besides second base. Played a little third base, played a little first base. Jose Ramirez is on third base right now for the Guardians. He's not going anywhere. Josh Naylor, final year of arbitration. He's probably on the trade block, so maybe Brito gets a decent amount of time over at first base. He's only 5'11", but still, he's got enough pop, I think, where he could hang there. He is playing some corner outfield as well. He is blocked at second base by Andres Jimenez. So there are going to be options for Juan Brito. But the Cal Quantrill non-tendering means that Rockies gave up Cody Huff for a 1-year rental in Cal Quantrill. Cody Huff, a catcher for the Rockies. It was just a straight-up 1-for-1 deal in the Cal Quantrill trade after he was designated for assignment. Guardians liked the offer of Huff better than any of the other ones that were out there. Huff, a 7th-round pick out of Stanford back in 2022. You understand, Rockies already had Drew Romo. Hunter Goodman has now inserted himself back into the picture. But you rented Cal Quantrill for Cody Huff. Now, Huff is not on Cleveland's top 30 prospects right now. I don't know if he'll make the back end of it, but keep in mind, the Guardians were ranked mid-season after the draft. They were ranked as the 4th best system in all of baseball. So they've got a lot of quality at the top, and they've got a lot of quantity in terms of depth. But Cody Huff, solid in Double-A last year in the Eastern League for the Akron Rubber Ducks, 704 OPS. He's going to get a bulk of the playing time in AAA next year. Both Huff and Brito could make an impact on Cleveland's roster, their big league roster, in 2025. Gotta hope that Nolan Jones is able to rebound, and then you won't feel quite as bad if Brito ends up being a breakout player either this next season or 2026. But you got to do it. You got to make those trades. You got to take those risks. It's okay. Where does Brendan Rodgers end up? I went over to Fangraphs to look at their version of wins above replacement, F4, and Colorado was actually 27th with 0.4 wins above replacement, second worst in the National League. So a good Brendan Rodgers, who is he going to be able to help? Boston was ranked 30th, Angels were 29th, Giants 28th, any of those, sure. Teams that were barely better at second base production than Colorado, St. Louis, the White Sox, the Pirates, Twins, Orioles. Now, Seattle was around that bottom third. They've been linked with Ha-Sung Kim. Now, Ha-Sung Kim is not Ha-Sung Kim. He is another player from South Korea. Ha-Seong Kim, 25-year-old second baseman, does need to be posted by his team, the Kiwoom Heroes, over in Korea in the KBO. Different player than the shortstop Ha-Seong Kim. Mariners heavily linked and interested in him. So not sure what Rodgers is going to end up doing. Will he have to play a little bit of third base? Does he need to add a first baseman's mitt to his bag? Could be. Very well could be. Corner outfield, he may have to go the utility man route for a little while before gaining some traction, building back up confidence, showing that he can be relied upon, his ability to stay available. You know, after crafting the Arenado and Story getting back together, it would be absolutely diabolical if LeMahieu and Rodgers ended up teaming up on the Yankees. Diabolical for more reasons than one. First off, we'd get a shaved down Brendan Rodgers, which is that could be a deal breaker. That could be a deal breaker for B-Rod. The mullet, the beard. I mean, hey, pinstripes. Pinstripes can make any freshly shaven boy look pretty darn sharp. So we'd get the shaved down version of Brendan Rodgers. And it would mean that the last 13 years of Rockies second baseman would be playing together. Think about that. 2012 through 2018, the DJ LeMahieu era at second base. Then in 2019, it's supposed to be the start of the Rodgers era. If he eventually gets there in May, gets hurt for the next 2 years, but the Rodgers era starts in 2019. 13 years of Rockies second baseman together on the Yankees. They never played together in the majors. LeMahieu and Rodgers, keep in mind. Never played together. And LeMahieu is signed for one more year after 2025 with the Yankees, which does mean that when LeMahieu takes the field for the first time with the Yankees in 2025, he will have played the same amount of seasons with the Yankees as he did with the Colorado Rockies. Even if LeMahieu stays in New York for 2026 and plays a majority of games, good chance that he doesn't actually reach the same amount of games played with the Yankees as he did with the Rockies. That's another wild one to think about. Juan Soto taking offers. Yeah, Buster Olney of ESPN said that Soto is taking offers this week. There's already been 5 teams that had those kind of conversations with Soto and his super agent, Scott Boras. I think Boras has learned from last offseason. He wants to be more aggressive, be more active early to find homes for those top free agents sooner than later, so it doesn't end up being a late push, which has worked for him in the past, where teams are looking at their roster and you get to February and you say, shoot, if we just do this one more deal, that might put us over the hump. Yeah, we will pay that asking price because this guy's holding out. If we get him, the other team doesn't get him. That's a double bump. But if we miss out and we don't pay that asking price here in late January, February, and our rival gets that player, well, we've lost out and they've gained. That strategy did not work last offseason for Scott Boras. 6 teams in the hunt for Juan Soto. Yankees, Mets, Boston, Dodgers, Toronto, and Philadelphia. The Giants and the Royals have reached out to Juan Soto, as have the Rays, but I really don't see there being any chance he goes to any of those 3 destinations. Soto wants to win. He doesn't want to deal with headaches. Tampa Bay and Kansas City just have not shown an ability to stay contenders through multiple years over the long term, like the Yankees, Dodgers, Phillies, a few others. That's a headache if after a couple years you go, you know what? We're going to have to probably cut some costs. That's one of the reasons why Nolan Arenado wasn't too happy was because the Rockies were not going to be aggressive on both the trade front and free agency. Said, whoa, I need some help here, and I'm not getting it. Juan Soto would have to deal with that in a smaller market. San Francisco should have the money in that market, especially as the A's are gone. Now they're not doing battle with them in any capacity. Not that it was much of a battle the last few years. But San Francisco has got all of the Bay Area to themselves now. But President of Baseball Operations, Buster Posey, has indicated they may try to slash payroll just a little bit. Soto might want to stay on the East Coast. That's what he's used to. He's used to spring training in Florida. It's only 6 weeks. So he can deal with it if he has to go back to Arizona, which he was for one spring with the Padres. But he's got the freedom and the power to make that decision. So that would rule the Dodgers out. That means you got Yankees, Mets, Phillies, Boston, Toronto. Mets seem to be the team that everybody seems to think it's going to happen. But my money would have to be on the Yankees. Just like with Aaron Judge, the Yankees will not allow somebody else to re-sign Juan Soto. And so therefore Juan Soto is going to go back to the New York Yankees. Done. Chat saying Soto to the Dodgers? No way. Not happening. Not happening. I mean, they can afford it. We know that the Dodgers can afford it, as crazy as that would be. They get Soto and then Roki Sasaki. I mean, we have not seen a ton of super teams quite like that before. That would be wild. I don't think Soto's coming to the Dodgers. Don't think that's happening. Too many left-handed hitters. Ohtani, Freeman, Soto. They can't win. I'm kidding, by the way. Let's talk about the coaching shuffle. Reds add Mike Napoli after 5 seasons with the Cubs. Napoli joining Terry Francona's staff. Undetermined role right now for Napoli. He was the quality assurance coach with the Cubs. Was first base coach this past season. Was let go in October. Reds making some interesting moves. Those little moves, those coaching moves, spending a little bit more. Guys are lining up to work with Terry Francona, Hall of Fame manager, back on the field again. Reds, they're going to the postseason in 2025. I know their offseason hasn't begun, but they have made enough of the right moves to move the needle. Bringing Terry Francona to Cincinnati is going to pay off in dividends. And yes, I was saying that this time last year when the Cubs got Craig Counsell. Yes, I'm aware of that. But in the long run, Cubs will be better off with Craig Counsell. Chris Woodward, former Rangers manager, joins the Dodger staff as their new first base coach. He takes over for Clayton McCullough, who accepted the Marlins managerial position. Robinson Chirino. Remember Robinson Chirinos? He just retired in May of 2023. He is now Brandon Hyde's bench coach in Baltimore. He's been a player that has future managerial candidate written all over him. And he helps out Baltimore. Maybe even is going to be Hyde's successor should the Orioles get off to a rough start. They made the postseason the past 2 years, but they have not won a postseason game. Hyde was there when they were really bad. Those 100-loss seasons, Brandon Hyde was there. He helped that team grow and find that growth. Now, have they hit a brick wall? Sometimes that happens with teams, and you have to go a different direction. When things get stale or stagnate, you have to do something different. You can't be complacent. And so the Orioles, will be interesting to see if they, and I'm not going to say if they become complacent and keep Hyde around if they're off to a bad start. But they may have to make the aggressive decision to say, you know what? It's not working out. We need a new voice in this clubhouse. We need a new voice to get more out of these players because they've hit a wall and they're just not getting any better. And it just isn't working. Sometimes you got to do that with your manager and your coaching staff. We'll see what happens in Baltimore with that. Kevin Seitzer just hired as the Mariners' new hitting coach. He comes over from Atlanta, where he had a ton of success with their young lineup. Michael Harris II, Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Ronald Acuna Jr., just to name a few. Cleveland making some big news. They're able to hire Alyssa Nakken, first woman, you might remember her, to take a full-time role on a big league coaching staff. She goes from the Giants to the Guardians. She accepts a job in the player development department with Cleveland. And Cleveland also signs away Bobby Kinney from the Tampa Bay Rays. Again, an organization that has been successful. You might as well hire out of those organizations because they're going to bring something new. They're going to be ambitious. They are going to want to do things in a way in which has proven to be successful. So Cleveland making some news there on the coaching front after they already did with Stephen Vogt becoming the quickest manager to go from a player to winning the Manager of the Year award. Appreciate you sticking around. Going to be back again Wednesday night, 6:30. Going to be talking with Skylar Tibbins, Evan Lang of Affected by Altitude and Purple Row. Talking Thanksgiving. What are you thankful for? Yeah, look, say what you will about losing 100 games back-to-back seasons, but there's still something to be thankful for. I mean, if you live in Oakland, you don't have anything to be thankful for, unfortunately, because your team's gone. So there's at least that. We'll see what they are thankful for. We'll see what you have to say over on the social medias at Patrick D. Lyons or at Patrick D. Lyons MLB. On Twitter, at Rockies Insider, Threads, X, you name it. Hey, look at that. Quit buttering me up. I'm thankful for Patrick and the Rockies, and blessings. Appreciate you out there. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the momentum. But as I like to say, momentum when it comes to a podcast can only be as good as your next show. So I will talk to you then.